Welcome to another edition of Spooky News from Spooky Ventures. This is the September 30th, 2022 installment. It is, of course, the final one before we enter full spooky season for most people at the start of October. Yes, I know that for people like myself, spooky season is year-round, but this is the time of year when the rest of the world gets on the same creepy train we're always riding. Now, before I get to the news, I just want to mention a few things. First, as always, please interact with us via comments. If there's some spooky news you think I should cover, please send that information. Also, please like our videos and share them, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Secondly, keep in mind that the YouTube channel is just one piece of the Spooky Ventures picture. Be sure to have a look at the main site at spookyventures.com. There you'll find a sampling of the YouTube videos, some samplings of some of our playlist stuff, links to our Cafe Press store at cafepress.com, Spooky Ventures, some spooky books from Tales of Wonder and Dread, spooky calendars, and our events calendar that lists dates that should be of interest to all the spooky people out there. Now, I'm going to start this one off with a weird piece of real-life news. Apparently, on a recent American Airlines flight from LAX to Dallas, the sounds of someone who seemed to be in pain were heard over the onboard intercom. Now, I'm not saying that it sounds ghostly. To me, it sounds like someone trying to be silly or pull a prank. That said, it would be rather disconcerting to hear that on a flight. But the mystery gets weirder and deeper. First, it seems that the intercom system is actually hardwired and therefore not accessible via wireless devices. Now, the airline came up with an explanation that the volume level of the intercom increases when the engines are on, and that system somehow malfunctioned and caused the sounds. But that doesn't really hold up as an answer for me, because I can't understand how it would create those specific sounds, which seem to be very much human-generated. Still, as weird as all that is, it's not the end of the story. Apparently such sounds have been reported on a few other flights. At least one of the reports was on another American Airlines flight, but I'm not sure about the others. It's possible that it's some other airlines. Also, I don't know if they were all experienced on the same type of flight, or same type of plane. I mean, if it's the equipment problem, you would think it would be limited to that type of airplane. As non-supernatural as these sounds seem, on a flight they would still be pretty frightening, because you would have to wonder if there are any other, perhaps much worse things planned by whoever is creating those sounds. Now, moving on from one type of spooky sound to another, if you have Sirius XM, you might find a new offering to be of interest. That's because from October 14th at 3 a.m. to November 1st at 3 a.m., both of those times are in the Eastern Time Zone, Channel 104 will become Scream Radio. The sounds you'll hear will include spooky stories, horror movie soundtracks, spooky songs, and much more. My only issue is the fact that they're only running it basically for 2 weeks. I mean, don't get me wrong, any time is better than no time, but it would certainly be more up our alley if they started earlier. I mean, why not do it on October 1st? From radio, let's turn to TV, and specifically streaming TV. I'm going to begin this section with a follow-up to a story I included in last week's Spooky News. When I reported on the new trailer for the upcoming Werewolf by Night series coming to Disney+, I mentioned that it was listed as a comedy. Well, over the last week, they have changed the category from comedy to horror. So I'm guessing there will still be comedy aspects, but it is considered more of a horror film than a comedy. Well, it's actually not a movie, it's a special feature, but still, it'll be more horror. Turning next to Netflix, Mike Flanagan's name springs to mind. You know, it might be a fair comparison to think of him as the Dan Curtis of the modern age. For those who don't know, Dan Curtis was the god of horror television in the 1960s and 70s. Mike Flanagan has given us plenty of cool horror television in recent years, and his newest entry is the young adult-leaning series The Midnight Club. That show premieres on October 7th, and a new trailer has been released ahead of that date. Now, if you're a fan of the 1981 cult classic movie Scanners, you should be pleased with a new piece of news. It's been announced that HBO is planning a new TV series set in the universe created by the David Cronenberg film. There isn't a trailer yet or a release date, but I have to say that I'm pretty excited to hear about this series. Another TV story that has ties to older series is the news of a new show coming to Paramount Plus later this year. That show is called Wolfpack, and not only is it tied to Teen Wolf, but is also bringing a big star from horror television back to the genre. That star is Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Sarah Michelle Gellar. Now, it's said to show off a more adult focus than you might expect from either Gellar's work or the earlier pieces in the Teen Wolf world. The only release date that's been revealed thus far is, quote, later this year. Since we've been looking at some stories about older horror getting revisited in new series, it seems appropriate to talk about a new series coming to Epix. That series debuts on October 2nd, and it's a 5-part documentary focusing on the history of horror from the 1930s to the current day. It's called Blumhouse's Compendium of Horror, and sounds like something that well worth checking out, particularly for those of us who really enjoy the whole world of horror and the history of it. Turning to movies, but keeping with the retro connection angle, I want to talk a little bit about the movie Near Dark. A vampire film starring Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen that was originally released around the same time as Lost Boys, Near Dark is largely forgotten in terms of the general public, while Lost Boys is considered an all-time classic. I know it's not a popular opinion among outside of horror circles, but personally I've always preferred Near Dark, and it is well regarded in the horror community. Perhaps one reason it's been forgotten is that it's scarcely been distributed. I mean, it's nearly impossible to stream, and last time I looked, buying a disc of it is pretty pricey. Well, Criterion Channel is going to have it available for streaming on October 1st, and I think for the whole month at least of October. If you have their service, don't let this one get by. If you haven't seen it, you need to. If you have, I'm sure it's well worth revisiting. That takes us to the end of the news articles for this week. As I always do at the close of these segments, I want to look at some dates on our spooky events calendar. And many of those continue to be of the horror movie news, so I guess that news continues in a different way. Before I get to those, though, let me mention that you can always check out the Spooky Ventures events calendar for yourself. Just visit spookyventures.com and then scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. It's actually not that long of a scroll, really, where you'll find the link for the events calendar. Now, first, looking at that calendar, there are 4 new movies opening today. I'm not sure if they're all opening in theaters, but Fandango lists them all as debuting today. The movies are Smile, which is probably the most anticipated film of the bunch, Among the Living, Devil's Workshop, and My Best Friend's Exorcism. For fans of the old Universal horror movies, and really who isn't, tomorrow, October 1st, holds a real treat. There's going to be a one-day event at local theaters with a double feature of 2 classic Universal films, The Mummy and The Bride of Frankenstein. Now, it's going to be at selected theaters, so you'll need to look around to see where it's playing near you. Another movie scheduled to open tomorrow is Two Witches. Again, I'm not sure of the release information, but Fandango should have that info for you. Next Friday, October 7th, sees the release of the movie Dark Glasses. And we also have a couple of birthdays to mark this week. Anne Rice's birthday is October 4th, and the next day, the 5th, sees the anniversary of Clive Barker's birth. That brings us to the end of this edition of Spooky News. I should be back next Friday with another one. Until then, always remember to keep it spooky. Spooky Ventures is the home for spooky content and spooky merchandise on the web. Check it out today at spookyventures.com. And remember, always keep it spooky.